It is a great night to talk about wrestling because we had AEW Forbidden Door this evening with plenty to talk about coming out of the show, including an incredible main event between Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay. And get to all that in a which of course we will get to, but first I want to run through the whole card, kind of highlight a couple things that worked, didn't work. It was a typical AEW pay-per-view, so it was a very long card, a very full card, a very long show. So think of this as like a bonus episode of Saw's War. I try to record that every Friday, so it's ready to go at some point on Saturday after I can edit it and get everything all set up. But doing that kind of is a disservice to some of these pay-per-views because, you know, the show tonight, Sunday night, if I wait till Friday, it's kind of like already too late to talk about it and highlight, you know, how good a show was or big things that happened. And so I kind of figured this something to try here, kind of see if it works, and just put up these kind of recaps for bigger shows or just thoughts and reactions. So let me know if this is something you would like to see more, if it's something that you would enjoy. I'm just trying to think of what's gonna, you know, work best. So, like a typical AEW card, Forbidden Door was absolutely packed. We had 15 matches, 5 matches on the pre-show. The pre-show started at 3:30. The main card started at 5. And then... So I'm on the West Coast. I'm in LA. So the pre-show started at 3:30. The main show started at 5. And it did not end until a little after 9 o'clock. That's like 6.5 hours, 5.5, 6 hours of wrestling, which is totally fine to be home and watching it and enjoying it. But like, I feel like the only thing that really suffers for these giant long marathon shows is the live crowd. I think there's a lot of times where the crowd just doesn't have the energy or the bandwidth. And I think it was a little noticeable tonight. Kind of starting off, obviously, with the pre-show matches, you're going to have people kind of filing in as the matches are going on. But on the main card, it other than the MJF match to start, it took a little bit to really get the crowd into it. And I don't know if that's a result of the Elite and the Acclaimed and Tanahashi not being like the hottest angle, or, you know, what the deal was with that. But it really, really felt like the crowd was picking and choosing where they were going to have those big reactions. It's not like that took away the quality of the wrestling. I thought this was an incredibly entertaining card from top to bottom, with maybe like 1 or 2 exceptions. But it did feel like it lacked the feeling of spectacle at a couple points, which... So we will get right to it. We have 5 pre-show matches. Essentially, we had an episode of Collision for the pre-show here, but it was a little weird. So 5 matches. I'm looking at the match times here. It totals out to about 40 minutes of a 90-minute pre-show, and it just felt overstuffed. Like, I'm glad we got to see Kyle Fletcher and Serpentico on the pre-show for, you know, such a big pay-per-view, but it was a 3-minute squash. Like, I don't know if we needed that like added on to an already way overlong show. So Kyle Fletcher squashed Serpentico. He is someone who I think could do amazing things moving forward if he starts to get the time and the storylines to really develop and improve and accentuate the skills that he already has, because he is incredibly talented already. The Kings of the Black Throne, Brody King and Malachi Black, won the 4-way tag team match, which was added on Saturday night. I recorded all the predictions and everything on Friday night, and of course, a couple more matches got added on, and that's okay. I should have known. I should have expected it would happen on Saturday. Nothing came out, which was crazy because the Collision was pre-taped. So the fact that it was pre-taped and I still had no idea, maybe I missed something or they were incredible at keeping it a secret, but Kings of the Black Throne win this 4-way tag team match. I don't know if there's like a tag match, like a title shot or anything like associated with it. It seemed like they were going to go after the trios titles. So I don't know if that's like, but they won the match. So that's always cool. Brody King is always awesome to see. Same with Malachi Black. I love seeing those guys. Ishii and Kyle O'Reilly were a fun tag team. It was a cool pairing, but it just kind of didn't feel like there was a point other than getting more people on the card. We had our first big crowd reaction of the night with the tag match between Willow Nightingale and Tom Nakano as they beat Chris Statlander and Momo Watanabe in a pretty fun tag match. Obviously, Willow is the most over babyface on the roster, and they really smart, really well booked to have her and Chris Statlander just not really interact. Ahead of their match this week, they will be competing on Dynamite in a Owen Hart women's tournament qualifying match, so that'll be hopefully really, really exciting to see. I'm sure kind of feels like Chris Statlander would have to win that just to kind of solidify this heel turn, but that's getting ahead of myself. I'm getting ahead of myself. There's plenty of Forbidden Door to talk about. I don't know what I'm doing. So a really fun match. Like I said, really got the crowd going for one of the first times of the show outside of the fans in attendance barking for Brody King. Was the only other time where it was really okay, this crowd is they're filing in, but they're fired up. Then we kept that momentum going with Mariah May taking on Saraya in an Owen Hart women's tournament qualifying match, and Mariah May picks up the win. It was a fun match. It was a fun match that I think did more to prove just how far along Mariah May has come in ring as a character, and honestly just endearing herself to the AEW fans, because it really feels like her and Willow Nightingale and a couple others are really the pillars for the women's division in the future, moving forward. I'm fully convinced that Mariah May is going to be the one to take the women's title off of Toni Storm eventually, and I think this is just a step towards getting there. And this story has been one of the best already, or the best in AEW, with Mina Shirakawa, Mariah May, and Toni Storm and their triangle. This match did more to kind of lay the groundwork for where that story might be heading than it really did telling a story between Mariah May and Saraya. And in the last match of the pre-show, we had the Lucha Bros and Mystico take on Los Ingobernables de Japón, which apparently is a huge deal. I'm not super familiar with a lot of promotions and things outside of WWE and AEW, and so I was reading what a big deal it was to have Mystico tag with the Lucha Bros, and the fans in attendance were chanting, and the fans had the holy shit chants going, and clearly it was a big deal, and it was cool to kind of do a little bit of research into that and kind of see why it was such a moment, and to see that moment happen is a cool thing. It's cool to see companies finally starting to work together and putting on these types of shows, and kind of putting the wrestling and the fans and everything first. And then this match was a lot of fun as well. It was a great blend of styles. The Lucha Bros have been on fire since they both came back from time away injuries. I know Penta is the subject of a lot of contract discussions with his deal expiring soon, but hopefully they find a way to keep him, because I can't really imagine watching one Lucha Bro without the other in rival promotions. That just seems wrong. The chemistry those guys have, the way they perform together, I need to see them together as a team. We kicked off the main card with the hometown guy, MJF, defeating Hechicero in a really fun 10-minute sprint of a match that MJF still looks like he has not missed a beat after all of that missed time due to injury. I'm really curious to see the direction they're going to go with him now that he's back, and they are seemingly setting so many things up at once, so many potential roads that they could go with his character. And, this was a typical MJF kind of greatest hits type performance where he hit all the big spots, he popped the crowd with all of his typical showboating things, but he just looked incredible. That's the thing, is he wears, the suits and everything. Now he's wearing the shirt and the leather jacket, but he wears so much clothing that when he comes out and is super ripped, you're oh, I forgot he's that ripped. Good God. And Hechicero is someone I was not super familiar with, and the story of the match was MJF kind of underestimating him and what he brought to the match, and he was awesome. It was really cool to see that blending of styles. It feels like MJF is someone who will hang out in first or second gear a lot because he knows how athletically gifted he is. Like, it feels like he doesn't really, like, bust out everything he could possibly be doing all the time, which is probably smart. It's, you know, it's a good way to mitigate risk, and it's a good way to keep a lot of things, like, in the arsenal for when you need it or when you want to do something big and memorable. But it's just interesting, and this was the type of match that felt like it pushed him to that next gear where we were like, okay, so there's more going on here. It's not just a typical MJF match in the way it's going to unfold, and I really enjoyed that. Next up, we had the Elite defeating Team Scissor Ace, which was the Acclaimed and Tanahashi, in a match that I don't want to say the crowd isn't invested in the story, or who knows, but they started like different CM Punk chants throughout the match, and like just generally didn't really seem like to pop for it. And it was weird. It was weird because like I feel like Okada is one of those guys who will always get the reaction because he is such a spectacle and such a talented performer. But even the structure of this match, like everything built towards teasing this rekindling of Tanahashi and Okada's rivalry from New Japan, and it felt like as soon as they finally started interacting, boom, he hit the Rainmaker and it was over. So I don't really know where this all is going. It feels like they kind of don't know where it's going. I'd be curious to see how many people are involved in the booking of this story, and we know it's going at least till Blood and Guts. So hopefully we get a little bit more direction there, and Blood and Guts can end up being like the finishing touches on everything, because the longer this goes, I think the worse the reaction is going to get. Next up, we had the singles match in the Owen Hart men's tournament. It was Bryan Danielson taking on Shingo Takagi in a 20-minute classic. These two dudes beat the hell out of each other. And I said on Friday in the prediction preview pod segment, Danielson is almost too good at selling these devastating injuries, given, you know, how public his injury history is. Like, we all know exactly what has been wrong with him over his career and like why he had to stop for years. So really playing that up is almost too good of an ace in the hole to have, because there were a couple points where like the way he was selling, the way you had Nigel McGuinness on commentary like saying like stop the match, like it's almost too real. Like, I don't know. But they had an incredible match. Shingo, again, I'm not super familiar with New Japan or many of those outside promotions, but he looked like he came to work that day. Like, he put his work boots on that morning and was ready to go. That was an incredibly impressive blending of styles and combinations, and I really, really enjoyed this match. I think Danielson is about to go on an incredible run of matches, 2 All In, via this Owen Hart Cup tournament, and I cannot wait to see Danielson and Pac this Wednesday. Next up, we had Timeless Toni Storm versus Mina Shirakawa, both accompanied by Mariah May. The best story in AEW, like I said. Timeless Toni Storm retains in kind of a like unspectacular fashion, which was a bit of a theme of the night. Like, a lot of times it felt like the finishes were like super abrupt, and they just would come out of nowhere. Like, the MJF finish was like a brainbuster, and that was it. And then Toni Storm, it was, you know, oh, here's a snap suplex, boom, Storm Zero, it's over. Like, it just happened so fast in so many of these matches that it kind of started to feel a little, like, redundant. But this match, I think, lived up to the hype that I had going into it. I think Mina Shirakawa, in a short amount of time, has really put fans on notice. I think if she leaves now, it's a huge loss to this story and to AEW overall, because she has come over and immediately made an impact in this story and in-ring performances. I thought her and Toni Storm put on one of the best matches of Toni Storm's title reign. I think this was just a top-notch performance from everyone involved, and I would really like to... It felt like a definitive end with, you know, the three of them kind of hugging it out. They shared a kiss, then they all walked off into the sunset. Like, felt like a definitive end to this, but I hope to see them stick around as like a trio stable or just a trio group moving forward. Just need this story to keep going because it feels like it's all building towards Mariah May, Toni Storm at All In. And I would just like it to continue to be this weird story that just exists on AEW television for as long as possible. Next up, Zack Sabre Jr. defeated Orange Cassidy in a 16-minute singles match that was a lot of fun. These are two dudes, I've said before, they really have a lot of respect for each other, and they speak very respectfully about each other outside of AEW programming. And even on TV, Zack Sabre, or not on TV, but in the post-show media scrum, Zack Sabre's portion, he kind of said, like, if you're someone that judges Orange Cassidy as a wrestler, or like you like demerit him as a wrestler and don't think he's that good, like you're an idiot, basically. Like you're missing the point. And I'm really curious what this is going to mean for Orange Cassidy. I thought the two of them put on a great match. I think there was a lot of Orange Cassidy going into his bag a bit more than maybe we are familiar with or that we see too often. I really think that was a cool aspect of it, was Zack Sabre Jr. kind of bringing this out of him. And he loses. He loses another big, high-profile match. He came out again to his old music, The Pixies' Where Is My Mind. He had a black shirt on, and it just kind of feels like we're inching towards, like, maybe not full-fledged heel Orange Cassidy, because I don't know how that would work, but some type of, like, darker, angstier version of the character, which is kind of cool to see. Like, I'm really interested in what they're going to do with him and what this result is going to mean going forward for his character. Next up, we had the trios match between the Learning Tree and Jeff Cobb taking on Team Samoa Joe, which is Samoa Joe, Hook, and Shibata. It was a 13.5-minute match that featured everything from fans chanting "Please retire" at Chris Jericho. There was a "You Still Got It" chant that broke out that was immediately drowned out by a "No You Don't" chant that was quite louder. And it was just all over the place. It was crazy. There was a weird segment before where Jericho was like talking to the crowd about how he's from Long Island and he's the Long Island hero and he knows people love him. And I don't know. The Learning Tree stuff just is not doing it for me. I personally am not a fan. I see what he's doing, TV time, the Jericho Vortex, all of that, turning it all into the bit, but I just did not work. The good thing is we got to see Hook, Samoa Joe, and Shibata together. I really hope they stay as a trio for a long time because I think they're a really fun blending of personalities and styles, and I think Hook winning the match, hitting the Judas effect on Jericho, is going to be an interesting wrinkle that's probably going to be more important than we think it was. Like, I'm sure this is going to lead to some, 15-minute, see, Hook learned this from me because I'm the Learning Tree. He learned my move. Oh, you're welcome. Like, I can just hear it now from this coming Wednesday. So, we'll see if that happens, but I would hope that this is the end of the feud. But like I said, they are in the Jericho Vortex now, so nothing really will surprise me. But the good news is, after this match was done, felt like we hit a sweet spot where it was just nothing but bangers through the rest of the night. Starting off with the 6-man ladder match for the TNT title. These guys went out there and just worked their asses off. I could not believe some of the spots that some of these guys pulled out. I looked like Takeshita killed El Phantasmo. It was insane, some of the things they were doing. There was another, speaking of Bryan Danielson being really good at selling his injuries, Dante Martin broke his leg, compound fractured his leg in a ladder match last year, and they made sure to say that quite a lot, and he sold, a few times, oh no, not again, and it was hey, this is crazy, don't be in ladder matches anymore if this is how it's gonna go. Because he looked at a couple points like he was devastatingly injured. So I think I even tweeted, he's either, hurt or the greatest seller on earth. And I kind of still don't know where that is. But all of these guys had incredible performances. Eventually, the match was won by Jack Perry, who absolutely bludgeoned Mark Briscoe. in like a super, like he hit him with the ladder, and then while he was down, threw the ladder down onto him, and then hit the ladder with a chair, and then threw all of that out of the way, and then stepped on him to get on the ladder, and then go up and grab the title. Like, it was a really, like, unnecessarily brutal, like, even the commentators were like, well, he doesn't want him to get up, like, he's just making sure, and it was like, God, it's a good way to get heat, though, beat up Mark Briscoe, because that dude is incredible and so beloved. He had the crazy spot, too. He looked like Sabu out there, like redneck Sabu, running and jumping off the steel chair to send Takeshita through a table, through a ladder. Like, just crazy. Just so many crazy spots in this match that this is where I think AEW blurs the line the best in, like, hey, are they safe? Like, when they had that run of injuries and people were trying to start the, like, are they a dangerous promotion type of conversation, like, this is where it really, like, they can really play it to a strength, because this match had spots and moments that looked absolutely, like, just brutal, and all of these guys really went out there and put on a huge show. Like, this felt like it was going to be, like, one of, if not the top match of the night, and it was just purely off of their willingness to go out there and go crazy, and, like, as hard as they could the whole time. Mercedes Moné is now a double champ, defeating Stephanie Vaquer to win the New Japan Strong Women's Championship and to retain the TBS Championship. And really, Stephanie Vaquer, this was a coming out party for her. She looked incredible. Some of the moves, like, for being completely unfamiliar with her up until, like, yesterday when she wrestled on Collision on Saturday, like, I thought she had one of the strongest performances of the entire night. Honestly, the AEW women's division and all of the women on the card, they really had some of the most consistent and best performances of the entire show. And I think that's a testament to how much time and effort has been put into establishing more women, because they were really a bright spot throughout this entire pre-show, main card, everything. But Mercedes Moné retained. It was a little sloppy at a couple points, but the two of them had impeccable chemistry. They worked very well together. The finish was super clean with the moneymaker into the crossface finisher to get the submission. And then almost as soon as the match was over, we get the return of Dr. Britt Baker, who will clearly be challenging Mercedes Moné next. It's kind of an interesting choice because it feels like we're inching closer towards we have no choice but to go with heel Mercedes. Because Britt got a huge reaction. Maybe it was just because she's back, but we'll see what it looks like on Dynamite and moving forward. But the crowd was very happy to see her back. And they also booed the hell out of Mercedes for most of this match. Part of it was because she's from Boston and is a Boston sports fan. There was a huge, like, F the Red Sox chant at one point, and they just kind of booed her, like, relentlessly. And that's Long Island, you know, so maybe... So I don't know if that's going to lead to any, like, permanent changes in her character, but it was definitely noticeable. Like, the crowd, like, almost immediately started pulling for Stephanie Vaquer, and she just continued to win them over as it went on. So hopefully that's not the last we see of her either, because she absolutely looked like a star. Next, unfortunately, we have what I think was probably one of the most disappointing matches of the night, which was Naito versus Jon Moxley for the IWGP title. And I really thought this was going to be, like, a barn burner. Like, you know, like, you think of a typical Moxley match, and it just kind of felt like neither of these guys, like, hit that next level and hit that next gear. And, like, the commentary wasn't really, like, selling the story well, and, like, they weren't really, like, putting over, like, Jon Moxley was an outsider that came and took the title, and, like, he's fighting for the, like, Naito's fighting for the honor of New Japan now. Like, none of that. It was a weird, like, it didn't feel like it had stakes, even though it was for the IWGP World title, and it didn't feel like it had a clear-cut story until late in the match when it started to become, oh, Moxley's getting so frustrated. But it just, I don't know, it's something about it didn't gel in the way that I was hoping that it would. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people that enjoyed it, and that's totally fine. If it wasn't for me, it doesn't mean it wasn't for you. Nothing like that at all. I think that's part of what makes wrestling so awesome, is everyone can have different things that they like. But for me, it just didn't hit what I was looking for. And We'll see what happens next with Moxley. I think him coming back to AEW and being more of a fixture, even though he pops up all the time, it doesn't really feel like he's been involved in a whole lot. Probably because he's going back and forth to Japan so often. So hopefully this is a chance to really get back into something big that he can sink his teeth into weekly, because he's definitely been missed in that capacity at least. And finally, our main event, Swerve Strickland versus Will Ospreay for the AEW World Title. 30-minute barn burner. The entrances were incredible. The vibes were incredible. The crowd was on their feet. I think the fact that they ended up with this as the main event for this show was a positive in the end, because the reaction that both men got and the way the crowd was split the entire match showed that this was a good idea. It showed that this was a good decision, I think, and the two of them looked incredible together. The way they worked together was unbelievable. I had a lot of high hopes going into this match. No secret that these are my two favorite people in AEW right now, and to see them live up to all of that and more was something to see. I thought the storytelling throughout the match was great. We got to the end with Don Callis trying to get involved, and this weird moment where he hands Will Ospreay a screwdriver, and Will Ospreay's like threatening Prince Nana with it outside, and then decides against it, and then runs inside and immediately gets taken out. But it took like 3 or 4 house calls to get him. It took like 3 or 4 house calls and a big pressure to keep him down finally. There was a great moment near the end of the match where he kicked out of one of the house calls and like stood up and was just out on his feet trying to take his elbow pad off, and then he like tries to run across the ring and hit the hidden blade on Swerve, and Swerve just kind of like catches him and stops him and pats his head like, hey, it's okay, buddy, you've given it all you got, it's okay. And it was perfect storytelling. And then right after the match they shared a really nice moment that felt really genuine. Like Ospreay had mentioned that his grandma passed away this week, and this match would be dedicated to her, and then to go out there and put on a performance like that, and to, you know, have to sell the disappointment of losing, and I'm sure just the disappointment that comes with losing on top of all of that, it was a really emotional moment that was nice, because it instantly kind of brought everything back to a humanized point where, you know, you had the build where they're kind of getting more and more intense and more personal, and Swerve was kind of playing like hey, you got to be ruthless if you want to win type stuff up again. Nothing like dastardly, but like he was leaning into that like kind of like hard ass type more. So to see that immediately melt away at the end of the match with that kind of with that kind of show of respect was really, really cool to see. It was a good way to end the show. But I was kind of surprised. I thought it was going to be a little bit more like, hey, now the John Callis family's betraying Ospreay. Now here we go into Dynamite. But we did not get that. Instead, it ends with Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher having a moment while Don Callis nowhere to be seen, presumably still taken out by Prince Nana, and Swerve celebrating in the ring. And so we'll see what happens next. It is Ospreay's first loss in AEW. And I said, I thought Swerve being the one to hand him that first loss was a huge thing that would go a long way to establishing Swerve's credibility as a champion, which maybe has not been done well up until this point. And for Ospreay, it's a great use of that first loss, because now he goes into Dynamite to take on Daniel Garcia for the international title. And we could easily be looking at him losing everything in the span of a week, and the story becoming, okay, now how does he bounce back from that? What do we do next? But of course, the question is, what does this mean for All In? Well, who is Swerve going to wrestle at All In? Who is Ospreay going to wrestle at All In? Will they run this match back at All In? I hope, because it was incredible. I kind of figured this would be, you know, a match that would blow the roof off of the arena, and I think it hands down was the best match of the night. It was my favorite match of the night. It lived up to the hype that I had, the expectations that I had. I thought both guys came out looking great. Ospreay looked super strong in defeat, and it made Swerve look like even more of a world beater to be able to put him down like that and to win. Especially with no interference or anything like that. It was mostly pretty straightforward. You know, the story ends up being Ospreay's indecision and his wanting to do the right thing, and his conflict kind of costs him which is what they were building towards anyways. But really, I thought everything about it was very well told and well done. And yeah, so overall, I know going into a AEW pay-per-view that it's going to be a lot of matches. It's going to be a long time. It does feel like a lot of bang for your buck, at least. Like, you know you're going to get a lot of high-quality wrestling whenever you get any AEW pay-per-view, so I can never fault it for that. I can never fault them for that. I appreciate them keeping the costs where they do to then continue to stack these cards like this. I'll never say a bad thing about a AEW pay-per-view from a work rate standpoint. I think for the most part, their pay-per-views more than live up to expectations in terms of in-ring performance, even if the stories or booking decisions or anything don't always match that. So overall, I really enjoyed the show. I think it sets a lot of interesting things up for Dynamite and for moving forward. As we roll into All In August, I think there's a lot of opportunity for it to be even bigger than the first All In was, but we'll see what happens. We'll have plenty of time to get to all that later. This is about Forbidden Door. So please let me know what you thought about it. What matches did you like? What didn't work for you? What do you hope to see more of in the future? Let me know. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed Forbidden Door, and I will see you at the end of the week. Everybody have a good week.